There was a spirited debate surrounding Iran and their attempt to work on a nuclear weapon. What's your position on that? How do you think we should address Iran?
Well, the first thing we have to do is treat it like Ronald Reagan treated the Soviet Union and the satellite nations. It's the Green Revolution. Can no longer have a muted response from this administration. You've got to use economic diplomatic pressures to support the movement so that the tyrannical regime implodes beneath its own people's aspirations for freedom, the same way Poland did from beneath the yoke of the Soviet Union. That is the best way to do it. Secondly, we have to work with our partners to put meaningful sanctions on them, which we are, in fairness, in a bipartisan way doing in the House. But you have to recognize Russia and Communist China, especially through their puppet North Korea, are problematical, and we have got to make it clear that that affects their relationship with us. On the very day one time when you can pass sanctions from the West on Iran, if the Chinese are spending $300 billion for Iranian oil, that's a problem. So I would point out to them that a nuclear Iran is not just a problem for the West. It's not just a problem for Israel. It's going to be a problem for them in their relations with us.
Yeah. Well, Congressman Paul said, Iran's not a threat because they don't have an air force. They don't have. They can't even make their own gasoline. How would you respond to that?
Well, we heard these arguments back in the 30s when we had far less ability to travel. We were not in a globalized economy, and we did not have an enemy that was willing to put something on the back of somebody in a backpack and bring it over to the United States. And since post-September 11th, when we've seen people who will use even traditional vehicles for transportation, such as airplanes, and turn them into weapons to kill American citizens, a nuclear-armed Iran will result in no good. I would also point out that what they will then do is by having a nuclear deterrent in place, they will use that as an umbrella to continue to export terror.
Okay. And as far as the big elephant in the room for this debate was the economy.
No pun intended, it's a Republican debate.
Yeah. Creating jobs. How would President McCotter help to foster job growth?
In, the first thing you would do is make sure the EPA does not try to impose cap and trade through the use of the executive and the administrative branches. Okay. But what you have to do for legislation is you got to fix the banks. The Wall Street bailout failed. We're seeing the credit markets contract to the greatest extent since the Great Depression. And to have recapitalization without taxpayer money, debt for equity swaps, leverage limits have to be fixed so that they can't collapse on people. And you have to take the banks that are truly insolvent with a real stress test, break them up, separate off their assets, like the former Secretary of Treasury Baker said at the time. These are three things you have to do, because if the credit doesn't flow, nothing's going to move no matter what you do.
Okay. Last question. I'll let somebody else get to you.
Came in a suit.
Yeah. Education. What's a proper federal role in education? And as far as Common Core state standards have been, the Obama administration has been trying to implement them through the race to the top.
This is why a lot of us were very concerned. No Child Left Behind was passed before I got to Congress.
Yeah.
But Republicans, conservatives should never centralize that type of power in Washington. Parents, teachers, local control, block grants to states without federal strings as we continue to reduce the size and scope of the federal government or what are necessary. Things that empower the local governments, the parents. We cannot, for whatever reason, start centralizing them, because as conservatives we understand that once you put a tool on the table in Washington, the left is going to pick it up. And as you start to see, they're going to start to try to impose national standards that they think are important. Yeah. We prefer to let the parents decide what's important, with the teachers and the students.
Okay. So, thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, man.